What if I told you that some World Cup stadiums are used to host wedding parties and children's birthday celebrations just months after hosting the biggest tournament in football? This is the reality facing billions of dollars worth of World Cup infrastructure. While fans watch the spectacle on TV, seeing these incredible architectural masterpieces packed with 70,000 screaming supporters, the truth about what happens next is often far more depressing. And that's where our story begins. Today, we're uncovering the shocking fate of World Cup stadiums in Brazil, Russia, and Qatar, and the billion-dollar consequences they left behind. Before we dive into the disasters, let's understand the massive scale of World Cup stadium construction. The numbers are staggering. Brazil 2014 spent over $3.6 billion on stadium construction alone. That's not total tournament costs, just the venues. They built 5 completely new stadiums and renovated 7 others across a country the size of Europe. Russia 2018 originally budgeted $2.8 billion for their 12 stadiums, but ended up spending nearly $5 billion. Qatar 2022, the most expensive World Cup ever at over $220 billion total investment. But here's the problem. FIFA requires World Cup stadiums to meet specific criteria that often don't match local needs. Minimum 40,000 capacity for group stage venues, state-of-the-art facilities, and perfect pitch conditions. These requirements create magnificent stadiums that are completely oversized for local football clubs. Take Brazil's example. Most Brazilian league teams average 10,000 to 15,000 attendance. Yet they built 60,000 plus seat stadiums because FIFA demanded it. It's like building a Ferrari when you need a bicycle. But here's where it gets really crazy. FIFA walks away after 1 month, leaving countries with a 30-year financial nightmare. The pattern is always the same. FIFA swoops in, demands world-class venues, then disappears while local governments scramble to pay maintenance bills that can reach $10 million per stadium annually. Want to know the most shocking part? Some countries knew this would happen and built them anyway. Brazilian officials admitted before 2014 that several stadiums had no viable long-term plan. Russian authorities acknowledged that half their venues would require permanent government subsidies. Qatar spent $220 billion knowing their domestic league couldn't fill a single stadium. This creates what experts call the World Cup Stadium Curse, where the biggest sporting event in the world consistently produces the world's most expensive white elephants. Countries compete desperately to host the World Cup, then spend decades trying to figure out what to do with the architectural monsters they've created. Let's start with the most shocking example, Brazil. Brazil 2014 represents the most dramatic stadium transformation story in World Cup history. Within 3 years, some venues went from hosting World Cup semifinals to being completely abandoned. The crown jewel, the Maracanã in Rio de Janeiro, tells this story perfectly. This historic stadium hosted the 2014 final, where Germany beat Argentina 1-0. It then hosted the 2016 Olympics, but by 2017, shocking photos emerged showing a dried-up pitch covered in brown spots, ripped-out seats, and shattered windows. The stadium looked like a war zone. The reason? A $3 million debt to the local energy company led to power being shut off. Nobody could agree who was responsible for maintenance, the stadium owner, the operator, or the Olympics committee. So one of the world's most famous stadiums literally went dark. The Maracanã eventually recovered after $15 million in emergency repairs and now hosts Copa America finals. But other venues weren't so lucky. Arena das Dunas in Natal, where Luis Suarez famously bit Giorgio Chiellini, became so desperate for revenue, they started hosting wedding receptions and children's birthday parties. Imagine celebrating your 8th birthday where World Cup legends once played. The Estádio Nacional in Brasília cost nearly $1 billion, making it the second most expensive stadium in history after Wembley. This 72,000-seat monster hosted 7 World Cup games, including Brazil versus Cameroon. Today, it's used as a bus parking lot and government office space. Civil servants work in luxury boxes that once hosted FIFA dignitaries. Arena Pantanal in Cuiabá had to be urgently closed for roof repairs within months of the World Cup. Water poured through ceilings, electrical systems failed, and structural damage made it dangerous. The stadium that cost $230 million was literally falling apart. But the most embarrassing case is Arena de Amazonia in Manaus. Built in the heart of the Amazon rainforest for $300 million, it hosted just 4 World Cup games. Local teams now draw crowds of fewer than 1,000 people in a 44,000-seat stadium. The venue struggles to book even amateur matches. However, it's not all doom and gloom. Arena Corinthians in Sao Paulo, which hosted the opening match, successfully became home to one of Brazil's biggest clubs. Despite costing $450 million and not being finished until 11 months after the World Cup, it now averages 25,000 to 30,000 fans per game. The harsh truth? Out of Brazil's 12 World Cup stadiums, only about 3 are considered successful today. The rest survive on government subsidies or have found creative alternative uses that have nothing to do with football. Russia's approach to World Cup stadiums was different from Brazil's. They planned for legacy from the beginning. The results show a mixed but generally more successful picture, though not without dramatic failures. Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow represents the gold standard of World Cup venue reuse. The 81,000-seat venue hosted the final, where France beat Croatia 4-2. Today, it serves as Russia's national stadium and regular host for domestic cup finals. Its location in central Moscow and role as home for the national team ensures consistent use. Similarly, St. Petersburg Stadium became the permanent home of Zenit St. Petersburg. Despite being 9 years late and massively over budget during construction, the 69,000-seat stadium now hosts Champions League matches and sells out regularly for domestic games. But then came the disasters that showed even Russian planning couldn't prevent World Cup stadium failures. Volgograd Arena became a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons. On the day of the World Cup final, videos emerged showing flooding outside the stadium after heavy rain. The arena suffered water damage and became essentially unfit for use just days after the tournament ended. The $268 million stadium that sits beside the historic Mamayev Kurgan Memorial now requires constant federal subsidies to operate. Kaliningrad Stadium represents the most concerning case. Officials admit there's no business plan for the 35,000-seat venue. Local club Baltica plays in the second tier and draws tiny crowds. The stadium construction was so problematic that workers joked about blaming infrastructure failures on beavers. Roads leading to the venue have cracked and crumbled from poor construction. Fisht Stadium in Sochi created its own unique problems. Originally built as an enclosed venue for the 2014 Winter Olympics, it cost billions to convert into an open-air football stadium. After the World Cup, it became home to newly formed FC Sochi, but the club's second division status means the 47,000-seat venue is massively oversized. The most expensive maintenance costs belong to Rostov Arena and Samara Arena. Both require federal subsidies approaching $10 million annually just to keep operating. That's money Russian taxpayers pay every year because local clubs can't generate enough revenue to cover basic running costs. Overall, Russia's World Cup stadiums perform better than Brazil's, but half still require government support to survive. The lesson: even good planning can't overcome the fundamental mismatch between World Cup requirements and local needs. Qatar's World Cup represents the most expensive sports experiment in human history, and what happened to their stadiums will blow your mind. With unlimited oil money and a population smaller than many cities, Qatar built 7 architectural marvels that now reveal the darkest secrets of World Cup hosting. The centerpiece, Lusail Stadium, hosted Lionel Messi's crowning moment when Argentina beat France on penalties. But here's the bombshell. Qatar built the largest stadium in the Middle East, knowing they would immediately make it smaller. The 90,000-seat venue is planned for capacity reduction by half, because even Qatar admits they have no use for such a massive stadium. But that's nothing compared to the Stadium 974 scandal. Built from 974 shipping containers, matching Qatar's international dialing code, it was marketed as the world's first fully dismantleable stadium. Qatar promised to donate it to a developing nation after the World Cup. The marketing was brilliant, sustainable, reusable, a gift to global football. 2 years later, Stadium 974 sits abandoned in the exact same spot, slowly rusting in the desert heat. The revolutionary transportable stadium that was supposed to tour the world became just another expensive lie. Qatar spent hundreds of millions on a stadium they promised to give away, then couldn't even be bothered to dismantle it. The other venues tell equally shocking stories. Al Bayt Stadium, designed to look like a traditional Bedouin tent with a 60,000 capacity, has no permanent tenant and hosts maybe 5 to 6 events per year. Education City Stadium and Al Thumama Stadium are architectural masterpieces that sit empty 95% of the time. Here's the mind-bending reality. Qatar has more World Cup stadiums than they have professional football teams in their entire domestic league. They literally built more venues than they have clubs to fill them. Qatar's domestic league averages 500 to 2,000 attendance per match. That means their smallest stadium is about 20 times larger than what they actually need. It's like building an airport for a village of 100 people. But wait, it gets worse. Qatar's entire population is just 2.8 million people. Even if every single citizen attended football matches regularly, they couldn't fill these stadiums. The mathematical impossibility becomes clear when you realize they built 300,000 seats for a country that could fit in a single large stadium. The financial madness is staggering. Qatar spends an estimated $50 million annually just maintaining these empty venues. That's more than many countries' entire sports budgets, spent on stadiums that host maybe 10 events per year combined. Only Khalifa International Stadium found a genuine purpose as home to Qatar's national team, and that's only because they were smart enough to leave one venue mostly unchanged. Qatar's strategy now involves desperately hunting for international events. They hosted the 2024 AFC Asian Cup. They bid for every possible tournament, and they've started the 2024 Intercontinental Cup. But these occasional events are like putting band-aids on a $220 billion wound. The most damning evidence, Qatar officials themselves admit the true World Cup cost was only $8 billion, while the rest went to infrastructure they probably didn't need. They spent $212 billion on projects that have nothing to do with football, all justified by hosting a one-month tournament. Unlike Brazil's dramatic decay or Russia's mixed results, Qatar's stadiums exist in a surreal limbo. They're perfectly maintained, beautifully lit, and completely empty. They represent the ultimate example of how the World Cup's requirements can completely disconnect from local reality. Here's the brutal truth about World Cup stadiums. They shine brilliantly for 1 month, then risk becoming billion-dollar burdens for decades. The pattern is undeniable. Magnificent monuments built for football's biggest stage, only to turn into permanent problems once the spotlight fades. If you enjoyed this investigation into the reality of World Cup stadiums, make sure to like and subscribe for more content about the business of football. Thanks for watching.